Hello and good afternoon to you all. I hope you are all well and welcome to a new season of the MEED webinar program. I hope you all had a good summer, have come back to work refreshed, and it's just as well because the next 4 months are going to be particularly busy. We feel Q4 especially is one of the most active months in the projects market in the region in terms of new contracts and new contract awards. So as we enter the final stretch of the year, it's good to begin with an evaluation of where we stand with regards to the market. And today we'll be looking at the Saudi Arabia projects market across all sectors. And it will give you all an opportunity to see what's happening in the kingdom, which is by far away the most diverse and largest projects market right now in the GCC, and is the market which everyone is talking about, not just in the region, but globally as well. Now, my name, in case you don't know, is Ed James. I'm the head of content and research at MEED. And I'll be doing this presentation over the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so. And then I'll be taking any questions you might have afterwards in a Q&A session. To submit your questions on the menu bar in Zoom, which you should have in front of you on your screen, in the Q&A box, simply put in your questions and I will do my best to answer them during the Q&A session. Now, as ever, this presentation is being recorded. So it will be uploaded to YouTube over the next few days, and you'll be able to watch it again in your own time. We will send you the link once it's uploaded. And it's also the presentation itself will be sent out to everyone who's registered for this event over the next day or so. So you will also receive a PDF copy of this in addition to the recording, and you'll be able to share it with any colleagues you might wish to share it with, as well as look at it again in your own time. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be looking at the Saudi Arabia projects market, the market which everyone is talking about these days for a variety of reasons. And let's go. So as I mentioned, I work for MEED. MEED is a business intelligence organization based in Dubai that has been around since 1957. We have two main digital products. They are MEED.com, our news, features, and analysis service, and MEED Projects, which is our projects tracking service of all major projects in the Middle East, GCC, and Africa regions. More than 15,000 live projects currently tracked by our research team. If you want to know more about those, then you can simply visit MEED.com or MEEDprojects.com to find out a little bit more about them. This webinar is being done in conjunction with the release of our latest Saudi Arabia Projects Market 2024 report. This is always one of the most popular reports that we produce. It's in a Word format, as you can see, in more than 500 pages long, with hundreds of graphs, tables, and data points for companies to read and understand. It's a very active market right now in Saudi Arabia with thousands of projects, and it can be difficult to understand what's happening, the structures of projects and the different opportunities. And this report really is enabling you to understand the background for everything that's happening in the kingdom, as well as understand some of the major opportunities currently and going forward in the market. For anyone who's interested, you can benefit from a discount code where you can get $600 discount using the code webinar 600, as you can see there, and you'll be able to get a discount on the report price. That is available only for those of you attending today. You also have a QR code there if you wish to know more about the report, so scan that with your cameras if you wish. Now, I'll just take the opportunity as well to talk about a couple of events that we have coming up. The first of which is our Saudi Giga Projects 2025 event, which will be held in Riyadh from the 12th to the 14th of May next year. This follows on from an incredibly successful first edition of the Giga Project Summit in Riyadh earlier this year, where we had the majority of the Giga project clients speaking at the event, giving presentations and details of their Giga project plans, as well as how to qualify and register for the different contracts. So if you're at all interested in the Giga projects in Saudi Arabia, or indeed any of the major development programs in other segments such as utilities, railway, and power and water, then please find out a little bit more about the event by scanning the QR code there and learning a little bit more. As there are workshops with Giga Projects clients, there are meetings that can be arranged with them. There is also gala dinner, and it's a fantastic event. We had nearly 1,000 attendees last year, and as I said, the majority of the major Giga project clients in the kingdom as well who were speaking. And then finally, we also, coming up in the nearer future, we have in November, specifically 20th of November, we have our MENA Construction Summit. That's looking at the wider MENA region across different segments, and that is going to be held at the same time as our MEED Project Awards 2024 edition, which will be celebrating the best projects finished over the last year or so across different sectors and countries in a market. Now, our MENA Construction Summit is, again, one of our key events each year. We're going to have more than 20 key senior stakeholders from around the region speaking, and we'll have more than 300 senior attendees. So again, if you want to know more about that, there's a QR code, and register your interest now. I'll be at both events. I'll be involved in both events, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to see you all in person during those days. Okay, on to the data. Just to remind everyone that this is being recorded and that you will get a copy of this presentation. So you will have be able to look at it in your own time, because there is a lot of data in here, and it can be difficult to grasp everything as I go through the webinar, but you will have an opportunity to do so in due course once we've sent it to you. Okay, let's start off, as I normally do, taking a look back over the last year, taking into account the 2023 projects market performance. And we generally measure the projects market by using the value of contracts awarded across all sectors and countries in the GCC over a given year. And as you can see here, in 2023, the region, the 6 GCC states, recorded $236 billion of contracts awarded in 2023, a quite staggering number. Now, bear in mind that the previous record was about $170 billion recorded in 2014 and 2015. So this is well beyond any previous number, and is frankly quite staggering. I don't think anyone would have expected to see such a high number. And this is really a testament to the sort of explosive growth and acceleration in projects market activity that we've seen in recent months. So you'll see here that the market reached a previous peak in 2014-15 when the oil prices were above $100 a barrel. As we know, the oil price slumped and project spending slumped between 2016 and 2022. And it's only really been in the last year or so, 18 months or so, that we've really started to see this huge rise in project activity, driven by, as you'll see here, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So both of those two markets had a record year as well in 2023. Saudi Arabia with more than $110 billion of contracts awarded, and the UAE at about $85 billion of work awarded. Both of those, that's the highest they've ever experienced, even in that boom period, 2005 to 2008, and is really testament to a sort of new paradigm that we're seeing in terms of project activity in the region. On the other hand, the other 4 markets in the GCC have been struggling a little bit over the last few years, and are really only a small fraction of what's happening in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. There are some signs that there is a pickup in activity in Kuwait, and to a certain extent also in Oman. But nonetheless, these are markets which offer considerably fewer opportunities, or much smaller in size than the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So as you can see, UAE more than 3 times its 2022 number last year, and Saudi Arabia nearly twice the size. So very impressive performance indeed. Now, this presentation is about Saudi Arabia, so I'm going to focus now on the kingdom, taking a look at it in more detail. So as we know, last year was a record year for the kingdom with about $111 billion of contracts awarded. That's the first time any GCC state had recorded more than $100 billion of work awarded in a given 12-month period. And it's really very impressive indeed. And in fact, with Saudi Arabia, with that total of $111 billion, is one of the world's largest projects markets right now, and certainly one of the most diverse. And in terms of large-scale contracts, it really is right up there alongside the US, Japan, Korea, and China and India in terms of the larger scale projects. As you can see, the largest single sector, as it normally is in the Saudi Arabia and across the GCC, is the construction market. We had nearly $30 billion of work awarded, and that's, as you can see, we've seen pretty rapid growth in that segment since 2020. And we also you'll see in the transport infrastructure sector a similar rise over the last 3 years. Now, both of those sectors have been driven by and large by the Giga Projects program, of which they are the primary component. And you can see just what influence and impact that Giga Projects program is having on the market in Saudi Arabia. However, we also saw even greater growth in the power market, particularly in the renewable energy sector and also in the transmission distribution segment. And water, too, had a record year, very impressive growth for the water sector. And these numbers both underscore the prioritization of utilities by the government in the kingdom. And also, interestingly, most of those projects are being done on a PPP basis as well, using the private sector. Gas had a good year as well due to various major gas projects. However, oil struggled a little bit. And again, this reflects, I think, the increasing focus in the region and in Saudi Arabia on the gas market. We also saw petrochemicals have its best year in about a decade last year, primarily due to several major EPC contracts in the petrochemical space, of which the largest was the major EPC packages on the Al complex. So we've seen pretty impressive performance across most sectors in the kingdom. And I won't go through this page in too much details, but these are just the individual contracts awarded across the oil, gas, power, and water, i.e. EPC segments last year. And on the right-hand side, the largest construction and infrastructure contracts awarded in 2023. Of course, there are hundreds more, but this is just a selection of some of those. And you'll see the usual suspects on the left in terms of the major clients: Aramco, SPPC on the power side, Aramco subsidiaries like Sectoral, for example, and various other key government clients in the kingdom. On the right-hand side, you'll see it's dominated by the Giga Project clients like NEOM, like Qiddiya, like Debria, Red Sea Global, and then also some other very significant non-PIF Giga projects like King Salman Park and a host of other major projects, for example, Sports Boulevard. Just a reminder, please submit any questions you have in the Q&A box, and I will attempt to answer them at the end of this presentation in the Q&A session. And also that you'll receive a copy of this over the course of the next day or so, if you're registered for this webinar. And we'll also upload it to YouTube over the next few days as well. We'll send you that link as well over the next few days once it's uploaded. All right, now let's take a look at a little bit more detail at the different regional spending data as well. Of course, Saudi Arabia is split into various different provinces. We have the Eastern Province, which is the main oil and gas producing region. So that's historically has been one of the largest single segments, as you'll see here. And the other major regions of project spending have traditionally been Medina, and Mecca, which incorporates Jeddah as well. But over the last few years, with the rise of the Giga Projects program, we're also seeing increasing spending in regions which may not have had a lot of investment before, including Tabuk, which is the home of NEOM, the world's largest project. And as we're seeing increasingly, projects like provinces like Medina also being the recipient of increasing numbers of projects. Now, this raises certain challenges because unlike the Eastern Province or Riyadh, some of these provinces and regions have not experienced major project activity before, and therefore don't necessarily have the right infrastructure, the sufficient infrastructure, or labor accommodation, and cement facilities, for example, as other parts of the kingdom. So certainly it's been a challenge in some of the more remote or outer regions as they gear up for greater project spending. Okay, so question is, 2023 was a great year, record year for Saudi Arabia. How's it performing this year? So, as I mentioned before, nearly $112 billion of contracts awarded last year. As of yesterday, so I did this graph just yesterday, we had, according to the MEED project tracking database, about $80.5 billion of contracts awarded in the kingdom to the end of August. So with 4 months to go, that would appear on a pro rata basis that we will hit or even exceed the $112 billion awarded last year. So it does look like 2023 wasn't a one-off exception. It does look like the spending levels in the kingdom are set to be sustained. And that is very, very positive news indeed, because it means that we are entering a new paradigm for project activity and project spending in the kingdom. Of course, we can't know for sure over the longer term. Obviously, oil prices have an impact, geopolitical events, and so on. But it does seem that the kingdom has successfully transitioned from a projects market that was at best $70 billion to one now that is going to regularly exceed $100 billion. So you see here that the numbers over this year and last year are well above the historical 10-year average, nearly double that 10-year average. So 2024 also very, very good, which is, I'm sure, is good news. And well, at the end of the year and early next year, we'll be able to see what the full year numbers were. So, as ever, I've got a number of poll questions for you. And today I'm going to ask questions primarily about Saudi Arabia. And this is a question that people often talk about. Has your company acted on Saudi Arabia's rule that international companies must have their regional HQ in the kingdom to bid for public sector work? This is something that certainly everyone has been talking about and acting on. So the answers are yes, we have moved our regional HQ across over the past 2 years. No, but we are likely to do so over the next 2 years. No, and we are unlikely to do so. Or 4, it's not relevant, or we already have our regional HQ there. So let's see your answers. We've got 800 people online, so we're going to have a nice sample size. I see we already have 300 plus answers still coming in. Okay, so some interesting results here. Okay, we have about 30% of you saying it's not relevant, or we already had our regional HQ there. I assume many of you are Saudi companies or Saudi-based companies already. Then we have 26% of you saying no, and we are unlikely to move our HQ into Saudi Arabia. That's very interesting. Then we have, yes, we have moved our regional HQ across to the kingdom. That's 22% of you. And then 21% of you say we are likely to do so over the next 2 years. So about 43% of you are likely to or have moved your HQ over to the kingdom. In fact, if I exclude the not relevant, we have 300, 400 say. So a quarter of you have no plans to move your HQ to the region, while the other 3/4 have done so or will do so. Good to know. Thank you very much for that. Right, so that's 2023 and year-to-date 2024 over with. Now, let's see what the future holds, both in the short term and the long term. Okay, so we saw the data just now that 2024 year-to-date is doing well, and that we are in a good position to beat last year's number. However, I think it's important here to look at some of the data around 2024 year-to-date data. And you can see here that in some segments, we are lagging behind a little bit on that 2023 number, particularly construction. And we have heard a lot about construction number being challenging over in terms of some of the giga projects over the last 12 months, and that seems to be demonstrated here. However, other segments of the market appear to be doing quite well on a pro rata basis. So what are the major contracts awarded in the kingdom a year to date, just to support that data? And you can see on the oil, gas, power and water side, we have some major contracts awarded already to date this year. We've got the major packages on Lefadili, Aramco gas processing program. We've got, of course, the dam project for Trojena, won by WeBuild, $4.7 billion. We have contracts like the SEA electric vehicle manufacturing plant as well. And you'll see here a large number of solar PV power plant projects, which I'll move on to later on in this presentation. Of course, we also had the awards for the 14 or so master gas system expansion EPC packages worth more than $7 billion. So you can see oil and gas and power, water have been extremely active this year so far. And we're also seeing on the construction infrastructure side, again, a lot of major contracts awarded. But if you look closely here, you'll notice that there are perhaps fewer giga projects on this list this year than compared with previous years. Certainly at the top end of the table, we have some significant housing contracts and some significant road contracts for the Royal Commission. But you'll see that NEOM and some of the other key clients, maybe take Kidir, for example, Seven, have been a little bit less active. Diriyah has awarded some $4 billion of major contracts over the last couple of months and has been quite active. But you'll see that in terms of the $1 billion plus contracts, we haven't seen quite as much giga project activity as we may have done in the past. Now, just very quickly on the government spending objectives, which are outlined in its budget at the end of last year. This is something I've gone through before, but just gives you an indication of where the government is looking at its strategic priorities in terms of direct government spending from its own budget. You can see here, they specifically mention these investments, first of which is road projects, taken to, for example, they've specified this Jeddah Islamic Port Road. Second priority for them is the housing units, affordable housing for Saudi nationals. As you may know, the kingdom has set itself a target of more than 500,000 housing units to be built over the next few years under its 2030 vision. And the government target was for 50,000 houses to be built this year. Healthcare as well, 1,100 beds. That will be over half a dozen hospitals. Again, a stated government priority, as is the water segment, particularly on storage. Obviously, over the last 2 decades, been a lot of investment in desalination and transmission of potable water. But more recently, we're seeing an increasing focus on water storage, whether that's reservoirs and the requisite dams, but also in tank storage as well. And unlike previous years, now most of these are going to be done on a PPP basis. Industry as well is a key priority for the government, particularly in the Royal Commission for Jebel Yambu, also in Jizan and Ras Al Khair, industrial cities as well. And the government also made very clearly in a public document that with its intention to progress with its nuclear power program. Although Whether that will happen this year or not remains to be seen. And then finally, it specified another priority for its spending is the renewable energy program with a capacity of up to 20 gigawatts of solar and wind energy technologies to be developed this year, primarily solar PV. And I'll come on to that later as well. Okay, so some $80 billion plus of contracts awarded already this year in Saudi Arabia. So what about the last 4 months of the year? So to have a look for the final end year numbers, what we do is we go into MEED projects and we take into consideration only contracts at the bid evaluation stage. That is contracts where bids or prices have already been submitted, because these are the contracts which are most likely to be awarded in the short term by the end of the year. And if we total all those up, they are equal about $49 billion worth of contracts at that bid evaluation stage. And here on the left-hand side, we see some of those oil, gas, power, and water ones, as you can see, dominated by power generation projects, whether that's gas-fired or wind or solar projects. And on the right-hand side, we see the construction and infrastructure segment, where you can also see some major construction infrastructure contracts. Again, we have Riyadh Metro, we've got NEOM, the line, and Trojena, and several other giga project clients, such as Qiddiya and Roshan and King Salman International Airport, as well as it kicks off its development program. I won't go through all of these, but this just gives you a flavor of some of those key projects where bids have already been submitted and where we are waiting for an award. So even if all of these don't get awarded, you can see a clear path to Saudi Arabia hitting last year's record number as well. Keep the questions coming. I see there's already 24 or so, even more questions. So keep them coming and I'll do my best to answer them at the end of this presentation. Okay, well, longer term, what's the outlook for the next 5, 10, 15 years? So in the GCC as a whole, we have some $2.7 trillion of known, planned and unawarded projects. As you can see here, they're segment-wise split, and you can see that construction, which is basically hotels, villas, schools, hospitals, towers, offices, and so on, equates to about $1.52 trillion of work across the GCC, followed by transport and infrastructure at about $400 billion, and then power, $238 billion, petrochemicals, oil, gas, and so on. Just as a word of caution here, as a caveat, the visibility on oil and gas spending is much lower than on other segments. So the oil and gas numbers are maybe not like for like with other sectors, which have a much larger visibility over the longer term. Now, in terms of the longer term outlook for pipeline by country, we can see here Saudi Arabia is by far and away the largest future market, the largest pipeline of more than $1.5 trillion. And that's more than the all the other 6 GCC states combined. That said, the UAE at $600 billion is also a pretty massive market there. So big opportunity also in the Emirates. And then also Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain have between $60 and $200 billion each of known pipelines. So although they might on this graph look small compared with Saudi Arabia, they are in fact also very significant markets in their own right. Then just taking a look at the outlook for Saudi Arabia in particular, of that $1.5 trillion of pipeline in the kingdom, this is their status split. As you can see, of that $1.5 trillion, about $960 billion of projects in design, about $181 billion of projects in study. And then in terms of projects in the market, whether that's pre-qualification, bid evaluation, or main contract tender, we have nearly $300 billion or more than $300 billion of work out in the market right now, which again leads to a very positive short to medium term outlook for the market in the kingdom. Again, it doesn't look like 2023 was a one-off. It does look like with the numbers for this year already and that short-term pipeline that the current explosive nature of the market, the current acceleration of project activity is with us to stay over the next 2 years at least. And then just looking at the pipeline, that again, that $1.53 trillion pipeline in the kingdom, we can see that 60% of that is construction. Again, a lot of that is comprised of the giga projects like NEOM, like Qiddiya, Diriyah, Red Sea Global, and some of the other major projects in the kingdom. And then we have transport and infrastructure, $190 billion, power, $170 billion, and then $78 billion industrial. Again, with the caveat that oil, gas, petrochemical visibility is generally a little lower than the other segments. Next question. Okay, another question or topic that people often talk about is payments. I want to ask you all, is your company being paid on time? And the answers are no, and it's a big problem for us. No, but we can manage. 3, yes, we are being paid on time. And 4, yes, we're being paid on time, and our payments have actually got quicker. Let's see what you have to say. Well, not many of you have received payments more quickly, which perhaps is not a surprise. All right, so 27% of you say we are not being paid on time and it's a major issue. So that's a very concerning number of companies. We have 38% of you saying no, but we can manage. So that in total is more than 60% of you say basically you're not being paid on time. And just 29% of you say you are being paid on time, and 7% of you say you're being paid on time and you've actually seen payments accelerate. So roughly here we've got 60, 65, 66, 36 split or so. Apologies for my maths. Okay, good. Right. Quickly onto the Giga Projects program. I won't spend long on the Giga Projects because this webinar is on all sectors in Saudi Arabia, and we have done multiple presentations on the Giga Projects program this year. So the Giga Projects program is about $850 billion in total when we add up all of the projects which can be construed as Giga Projects. Roughly, they are split between the PIF subsidiary companies, of which there were 5 official Giga projects: NEOM, Qiddiya, Red Sea Global, Russian, and Diriyah. And then we have under there also other PIF subsidiaries, some of which will become official Giga projects, like New Maraba, King Salman International Airport, Al Balad Development Company, Saudi Downtown, Suda, Rural Medina, and Jeddah Central, and so on. We also have other very large projects which could be considered Giga projects, but which are not necessarily under the PIF. These include the Al Ula project, projects under the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, and King Salman Park and Riyadh Sports Boulevard as well. Each of those are multi-billion-dollar projects. And of course, other projects which we're going to look at today, which are not officially called Giga projects, but which are very significant in their own right, include WTTCO, Water Transmission, National Housing Company, Aramco, of course, Saudi Arabia Railways, Jeddah Airports Company, National Water Company, and so on. Very quickly, you've seen this slide quite a lot, I'm sure, many times before. These are the various different Giga projects, which under MEED terminology we describe as Giga projects, what they are, where they are, and you can see that to date, we've seen about $92 billion of contracts awarded on the Giga Projects program in the kingdom. Now that's a little over 10% of the total Giga Projects pipeline of about $850 billion that we estimate. So still at very early stages of the Giga Projects program. Now, there's been a lot of talk recently about slowing down in the Giga Projects program, slow down in contract awards, tendering, and so on. Let's get your opinion on this. If you have experience of this, have you seen a noticeable slowdown in activity on the Giga Projects program this year? Yes, a lot. yes, a little, it's about the same. Or no, we've seen an acceleration. It's picked up a little. No, it's picked up a lot. Let's get your opinions. And of course, only answer if you have experience or have been working on the Giga project. Okay, so very good sample size, more than 350 responses. And the answers are quite emphatic. 42% of you have say that you have seen a slowdown on activity on the Giga Projects program. 42% of you, a little. A lot of you, 29% of you say you've seen a big drop in Giga Projects activity. So that's 72% of you has seen a slowdown. 20% of you say it's about the same, and 10% of you say it's picked up. So I think that pretty much answers that question. So the market seems to suggest, based on your answers, that there has been a slowdown in the Giga projects. And the data, you'll be happy to know, says the same. We have seen last year some $30 billion of contracts awarded in the Giga Projects program. And you can see that that number has grown each year since 2017, a gradual uplift as the Giga Projects program accelerates. However, this year to date, we've only seen $17.8 billion of contracts on the Giga Projects program, which on a pro rata basis would suggest that we are going to struggle to hit last year's number and certainly struggle to beat it. So you can see here that there seems to have been a slowdown, definitely, certainly in terms of contract awards on the Giga Projects program. Okay, now let's look at some of the key projects outside of the Giga Projects program across different sectors. Now, Saudi Aramco, of course, the biggest client in the kingdom historically, and a client which is always going to have lots of work. Now, a couple of months ago, it revealed a 3-year capital expenditure program covering 99 projects, up to 20 major projects up to 2026, worth tens of billions of dollars. And it has split those 99 projects into 3 main segments. There are 58 oil, gas, and petrochemical projects up and downstream, 22 pipeline distribution projects, and 19 civil and marine infrastructure schemes. Now, 40 of those involve greenfield expansion or upgrade of hydrocarbons facilities, 12 of them which will be offshore. Major contracts include the self-recovery unit upgrades, dry gas handling at Sheba, and gas lift program at Marjan field. We also see downstream residue unit upgrades at Ras Tanura, and crude increment and produced water facilities programs at the Gawa. But perhaps the largest planned investments by Aramco over the next 2 years is these massive world-scale liquid to chemical complexes, which are basically integrations with existing refineries at Yasref, Samref, and Sasref in Yanbu and Jubail, and a new world-scale grassroots refinery on the Gulf Coast. So Aramco is likely to maintain its large expenditure levels. We've already seen, as I said, $9 billion plus of contracts awarded on their master gas system, phase 3 pipeline program, and we have many more major contracts still to come. Another key area of investment in the kingdom is transmission distribution. Saudi Electricity Company has about $126 billion of expenditure planned in substations and overhead lines over the next 6 years to 2030. As you can see here, I won't go through all the details, but you can see the breakdown: extra high voltage substations, high voltage overhead lines, extra high voltage overhead lines, and some underground cabling as well. And you can see 168 380 kV substations, a staggering number. And you can see 48,000 kilometers of overhead lines at extra high voltage, and some 5,000 kilometers of underground cabling, also in EHV and HV. be. So while there is a lot of focus and attention on power generation projects, particularly renewable ones, there is a similarly significant amount of investment planned in that just distribution and transmission segment as well. And indeed, some of the largest contracts awarded this year have been in high voltage converter systems and plants, linking up the different operational areas of SEC in the kingdom. For example, a $3 billion contract for the converter plants, linking the central operating area with the southern operating area. And then, of course, several other multi-million-dollar, $100 million or billion-dollar plus contracts for the overhead lines serving those as well. So finally, Saudi Arabia is connecting the different operating areas of SEC to create one single unified grid, but that's costing tens of billions of dollars, of course. Now, I've talked about transmission and distribution. I cannot ignore power generation. And we've moved now to a stage really where renewables are dominating power generation projects, not just in Saudi Arabia, but in the region as a whole. And you can see here in terms of active projects right now in Saudi Arabia in the power generation space, you can see just how many projects are under bidding right now or under construction. Yes, we do have 8 or so large 1.8 gigawatt IPPs, gas-fired IPPs, but all of the other projects coming up in the kingdom in power generation are going to be renewables, particularly solar power. And we're also starting to see for the first time some pumped hydropower storage projects, which have the dual benefit of not just being able to produce power, but also to store electricity as well. And you'll also see that almost all power generation projects, as well as water projects now in the kingdom and the region as a whole, are being done on a PPP basis using the private sector to finance, build, operate the plants. And also just to add as well, that with all these renewable energy projects, there is now a clear strategy to combine them with battery energy storage systems. And indeed, as the technology improves and becomes more efficient, we are starting to see those being applied. And as they get applied, this will enable the storage of the electricity for nighttime periods, for example, or when renewable energy projects are unable to operate. We looked at power. What about water? Again, very significant investments in distribution, transmission of water. The Water Transmission Technologies Company, government-owned, is spending up to $40 billion over the next few years on transmission systems. You can see what some of those are. These are linking the big desalination facilities on the coast with inland areas and cities. And you can see here massive pipelines, huge distance, requiring lots of pumping stations and very wide diameter. And again, running into the tens of billions of dollars. A lot of these, or most of these, will be done again on a PPP basis. Now, what about beyond the giga projects in the construction space? And I've taken here a list of some of the major contracts or projects in outside of the giga projects program, looking at either direct government entities or private sector players. And the list tends to be dominated by the housing program. As I mentioned, the government under its 2030 vision has the objective of building more than 500,000 housing units for Saudi nationals. This is being done under the National Housing Company, which in turn builds or develops these projects either individually or by itself, or using the private sector to develop the projects for it. And you'll see just some of the very significant projects here. We've seen already 2 major contracts awarded with Chinese companies to develop more than 20,000 housing units each. We've also seen the private sector come in and take control of projects with more than 1,000 units as well across the kingdom. You can see here the National Housing Company is planning 108,000 units in Riyadh, worth $20 billion, 41,000 houses being planned in Jeddah, worth more than $7.6 billion as well. But we've also got some significant private sector projects such as by Majid Al Futtaim and Riyadh North. We've got Shamul Holding, which is building the Avenues Mall in both Riyadh and Khobar. And we have Eagle Hills as well, some substantial contracts too. So there is a lot of work outside of the Giga projects, and part of the reason for this presentation is just to highlight that Giga projects are only one component of project opportunities in the kingdom. Likewise, railways. So I've talked before about two major contracts currently out in the market. One of those is Riyadh Line 7, which is a new metro linking Qiddiya via Diriyah, the New Murabba project, all the way to King Salman International Airport. Massive project that's at PQ stage with tendering imminent. We also have even closer to award the Riyadh Line 2 extension, which is currently under bid evaluation. That's a shorter network linking, extending Line 2 from King Saud University to Diriyah. At the same time, we have under design two huge high-speed projects linking Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, or specifically Doha and Riyadh, and Kuwait City and Riyadh. These are under design and are likely to be fast-tracked. It's not clear yet what the technology will be, but they are going to be high-speed. There is talk about maglev systems being used, but clearly you're talking about high-speed projects over several hundred kilometers. These are going to be projects well in excess, I would imagine, of $10–20 billion each. And then on a slightly smaller scale, we have SAR, doubling the track on its Northern Minerals Railway. And there are also other contracts around building freight yards and so on in Jubail and Ras Al Khair as well. And then finally, we've also seen a return of Mecca Metro that's coming back to the market after several years of delay, and we'll see what happens with that as the PQ and tenders come out. Now, I talked a bit about PPPs, and I think 2023 marked also a step change in the approach to PPPs in the kingdom. We moved from about $5 billion a year of PPPs over the previous 3 years to more than $25 billion of PPPs awarded in the kingdom last year. And this really reflects both, the pressures on government budgets, the pressures that mean that the government is looking increasingly to private finance and private sector companies to develop projects for it. But it also reflects for the first time, the award of PPPs in sectors outside of power and water. We've seen the award of the first PPPs in the education sector and also in the healthcare sector. And we're seeing tendering right now for road PPPs and airport PPPs. And as the references and the sectors expand from which PPPs can be applied, therefore also we're going to see more projects in the PPP space. Now, there are 300 PPPs in the pipeline in the kingdom, of which more than 250 are under the NCP, National Centre for Privatisation and PPP, which works with government clients to launch PPPs. And then we have PPPs also by giga projects such as Red Sea and NEOM in the development of their utilities. And we're likely to see more of the giga projects try to tap into private sector finance for other PPP elements on their projects. So it's a win-win. Essentially, you are diversifying project development to the private sector and getting private sector more involved, giving them opportunities, and you are lowering the stress on government budgets as well. Okay, so I've gone through some of the key segments there. We'll move on now to the Q&A session. But before I do so, just a reminder, if you want to get a huge amount of more information than what you've seen today in a lot more detail, all projects examined, all sectors examined, then please check out our Saudi Arabia Projects Market Report. Those of you on here today can benefit from a major discount on that. If you want to find out more, please scan this code. And again, just a reminder, we have our very successful and very valuable Saudi Giga Projects event coming up next year in Riyadh from the 12th to 14th of May. If you want to meet the Giga Project clients and other major clients that we've seen today, please check out the event, register your interest using that QR code there. And if you're interested in the MENA Construction Summit construction sector as a whole, then please join us or look at joining us on the 20th of November in Dubai for our Armenia Construction Summit, which is going to be held on the same day as our MEED Project Awards. Again, if you want to know more about that, please scan the QR code here. Right, one final question for you all about our different products, if you wish to answer, and then I'll move on to the Q&A, and I'll do my best to try and answer them. Just give you some time to answer the poll question. I also, while you're doing that, would just like to also highlight that if you are a MEED Projects or MEED Premium subscriber, you will soon receive invites for our breakfast briefings, which are going to be held in Abu Dhabi on the 17th of September, in Bahrain on the 25th of September, and then in November for our Dubai briefing as well. So if you are a MEED Project subscriber, then you will have received soon an invite to attend our in-person briefings. All right, so thank you very much for answering those questions. Now, let's move on to the Q&A. So I've got 50 plus questions. I will try and quickly go run through them all. Apologies in advance, however, if I don't get a chance to answer your question. First one, is there enough cash flow to fund all these projects and ensure on-time completion? Is 2030 still a realistic date for these giga projects? Right. Of course, big questions. Does Saudi Arabia have all the money to finance its projects plans? Well, with the slowdown and rescoping of some of these giga projects, the answer for that would suggest that not necessarily, but also it depends on the timeline you're looking at. So I don't believe any of these giga projects are going to be fully finished by 2030. And I think there may have been some misinterpretation around that date. I think if you look carefully at some of these giga projects, while 2030 was often stated as an ambition for some of the phases for these giga projects, really realistically looking at them, many of them continuing into 2030 and even to 2040 and beyond, such as their size and ambition. In terms of financing them, well, we've seen over time, some of these giga projects tap into the corporate loan market, also issue bonds, of course, guaranteed by the PIF. We've seen PIF itself launch various bond issuances to raise finance for its subsidiary project companies. And at the same time, we're also seeing, as I mentioned, an increasing use of the PPP model to help finance projects on these giga projects. Eventually, once they become revenue earning, the giga projects are expected to IPO and generate their own financing solutions for their capital expenditure plans. So there's certainly going to be a strain on budgets and financing all these projects. And I would certainly say that 2030 for many of them is really just a milestone or a goalpost and not necessarily the complete and final finish date for them. Is there a way to see and track contract awards? Yes, certainly is. That's what MEED Projects does. It's a projects tracker with all the information on the bidders, clients, consultants, scope of work, budgets, bid deadlines, peak qualified companies, and so on. You can find information on that product and platform at meedprojects.com. So if you are looking at a projects tracking service for business development or analysis, as indeed all the data here today comes from MEED Projects, you'll be able to get that from the MEED Projects platform. Question, have you seen an increase or decrease in PPP awards in the past 12 months? Well, I think I've answered that in a previous slide. Seen a clear increase in PPP contracts in 2023, and you can, just a couple of slides above, you'll see that in a slide. What is the completion timeline for completion of the NEOM project? What is the new timeline? Okay, well, it depends who you listen to. The new timeline, or the timeline for NEOM, is well into the 2030s and probably the 2040s. Now, some people say, oh, but NEOM said they would have it done by 2030. Actually, while that might have been the impression, NEOM never specifically said that it would complete by 2030. And in fact, if you look at the size and scale of the project, that was clearly impossible. So certain elements of NEOM will be finished by 2030. For example, Trojena is going to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games, so it does have to be ready by then. There's also a World Cup Stadium there, which also have to be finished. But large elements of it are going to have to continue beyond 2030. Okay, you've seen the graphs that the contracts award data is all-time high in Saudi Arabia, but on the other hand, there is news about scaling down of some giga projects. So as we saw, one in both are correct. So we've seen that, yes, last year was a record high. This year looks like we're going to match last year's numbers, but we're also seeing lower spending on the giga projects program, all of which have been demonstrated or have been confirmed here in this webinar with the data. However, what's happened is that other segments or sectors of the market outside of the Giga Projects program have taken up that slack. So whether it's power, water, oil and gas, or construction and transport outside the Giga Projects program, they have risen and they've taken up that shortfall that has been seen in the Giga Projects program. So both are correct. There is both an increase in project activity, but also a decrease in Giga Project activity this year. We got a question about contracts awarded to renewable energy projects. Well, this was submitted before I talked about renewable energy projects, so there is a slide about those in the presentation. In 2023, the total value of contract awards was $111 billion or $256 billion. So $111 billion is for Saudi Arabia, and $236 billion is for all 6 GCC states combined. I hope that clarifies that. What is the contract awarded value as of August 2023? Is it more than $80 billion or less? So the value of work awarded as of August 2024 year to date is more than $80 billion in Saudi Arabia. Yes. And that compares with $111 billion for all of last year. So on a pro rata basis, it does look like Saudi Arabia is going to match last year's spending levels. Okay, question here about one of the poll questions, regional HQ. I think that if any targets want to be met effectively, Saudi Arabia is going to have to loosen up on some of its extreme rules around setting up an HQ, as well as in terms of local content, customs duties, and other regulatory issues. So yes, this is a common topic brought up, localization, financial regulations, visas, setting up an HQ, and so on. These are topics that Saudi Arabia is well aware of, but it's also trying to do its best to balance attracting foreign investment and delivering its projects program while trying to improve local employment, skills transfer, and talent building as well. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes maybe not so. But it is a sort of worthy goal that the kingdom is attempting there. Is there a risk of oversupply in the hotel construction market? Well, it's an interesting question. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has 2 million plus a year of pilgrims for the Hajj and Umrah, and that number is likely to jump. And indeed, a lot of the hotel projects are designed to serve an increase in Islamic tourism to the kingdom. And if you look at projects like Rum Medina, Qura as well, and the expansion of the holy mosques, then these are clearly aimed at increasing capacity for the Umrah and Hajj. But also, Saudi Arabia doesn't have a tourism sector, or hasn't had tourism sector out of religious tourism for many years, ever really. And so if you're looking at these hotel projects in NEOM, the Red Sea Global, for example, then there is clear capacity and demand for those. So I'm not really concerned at the moment about an excess amount of hotel capacity. Question here about Aramco scaling back some of its projects, some of its LTA long-term agreement projects. And you may recall that Saudi Arabia announced that it was going to reduce its long-term oil production capacity goal from 13 million barrels a day to retain it at 12 million barrels a day. And that would, by extension, lead to less investment upstream in new production capacity projects. And as part of that, we've also seen some of the projects also fall by the wayside. However, these are being compensated for by increasing investments downstream and in the petrochemicals market. So you can see that there's a clear diversification into downstream petrochemicals to create more jobs, but also diversify the economy and create more value add from hydrocarbons production. But also we're seeing that in the downstream segment, in increasing refining capacity and in these liquids to chemical projects as well. So yes, on the one hand, we're seeing perhaps going to see a bit less investment upstream, but at the same time, we're seeing more investment downstream. More cities are coming under the jurisdiction of the Royal Commission, for example, Jazan, that's correct. So we're seeing now the Jazan city for basic industries come up under the Royal Commission. We also have now the Ras Al Khair industrial city as well, in addition to Jebel Nyambu. So yes, RCJY is taking control over more of the industrial developments there. Renewable energy projects up to 20 gigawatts. How much of this plan is already officially announced with a clear scope? Well, I think I answered that question as well. We are seeing more than 20 gigawatts. We have visibility of more than 40 gigawatts or even more, actually, of renewable energy and gas-fired power projects, all of which are going to be developed on a PPP basis. You see that from a previous slide. So Saudi Arabia has said it wants to build 20 gigawatts a year of renewable power for the foreseeable future. As it over time reduces its reliance on oil-fired or gas-fired oil capacity, and it's taking that very seriously. Obviously, has a 2060 net zero goal, and as part of that, to achieve that, it does need to build renewable energy capacity. Now, the cost of solar power production is almost the same as that of gas-fired production. So, by building solar power plants with battery energy storage systems, you can free up more oil and gas for downstream development. So it makes perfect sense for the kingdom to increasingly focus on renewable energy. What are the main challenges facing international construction companies in the kingdom? Well, I think there's obviously, as in any country, there are multiple challenges. Setting up in the kingdom, identifying opportunities, opening bank accounts, obtaining visas, and so on. The regular challenges that companies have, obtaining, sourcing labor as well, talent acquisition, and also, of course, Saudization and localization. Local content requirements are also challenges that are being faced by international construction companies. But I think you're also seeing perhaps a lack of visibility on projects is maybe affecting international companies' ability or desire to come into the kingdom. We also have bad experiences in the past around payments, which have resulted in a lot of international companies leaving the region over the last 10 years or so. But it goes without saying that there is a once in a generation opportunity in Saudi Arabia right now. We have seen major international companies like Bouygues, Rebuild, Vansi, and multiple Chinese contractors come into the Saudi Arabian market and be very successful. So there are undoubted opportunities there, but it's not something that is going to come to companies easily. They do have to work for it, and they do have to build relationships with the major clients. But it is a seller's market right now. And there is a shortage of contractors and suppliers, and contractual terms are becoming more favorable to the contracting community. Margins are rising. So it is a fantastic opportunity, I feel, for international contractors as well as regional and local ones. Can you please share the name of the contractors who are winning the contracts? Well, there's hundreds of contractors active, but maybe the biggest ones are, in terms of local companies, the ones which have been invested in by the PIF. That's Nesma, El Saif, Al Mabani, Al Bawani. We also have MBL been very successful recently, and a host of other major local contractors, Saudi Bin Laden as well, for example. In terms of international contractors, as I said, we build Bouygues. We've seen ALEC come in from the UAE. We've seen companies like Urbicon be quite successful coming out of Qatar, Medea coming out of Kuwait, and a large number of China State, for example, CCCC as well, come in and be successful in the kingdom. And there are also companies from Korea like Samsung, CNT have come in on the construction side. On the EPC side, it's a similar names. L&T has been very successful across all segments. Samsung Engineering, Hyundai Engineering, Saipem, Technip. These are the usual players have been dominating the oil and gas sector. For non-giga related projects, is there a central government tender portal? So for government contracts, i.e. procurement directly from government entities. So for example, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Transport, other organizations like Royal Commissions, then there is a centralized portal called Etimad, and companies need to register on the Etimad to be able to access government procurement tenders. And the portal is all in Arabic, and you must be registered. And there are certain requirements for companies to register and pre-qualify for it in order to be able to access government tenders. A rule for which example is having a Saudi Arabia office or presence. So yes, for government contracts coming directly out of the government budget, Ministry of Justice, municipalities as well, then yes, you need to be able, you can only access them through the Etimad portal. For giga projects, then you have to register individually with each of the giga projects. On all their websites, there is a registration page. Some of them use SAP Ariba, some of them use Oracle, some of them use their own systems, but you have to individually register with them. And then you've got some quasi-government entities like National Housing Company, like Royal Commission for Al Ula, and a few others where the tenders are not on Etimad, and you do have to register with them also individually. I've got a couple of questions. I don't have time or necessarily the insight to be able to answer. Do not see the rig in the giga projects under the PIF. Yes, that's correct. I don't think I put them all, but yes, there is in the eastern province off the Gulf Coast. There is the rig project, which is under procurement right now. This is a PRF subsidiary which is building this sort of entertainment, leisure, hotel type complex on oil rig, an offshore oil platform, essentially. A $5 billion plus project, which is under procurement and construction right now. So that's actively underway. And in terms of other new giga projects near to that, we also have the Gulf Coast Development Company, which is developing a residential, commercial, and agricultural hub near the divided zone between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia as well. Procurement is kicking off for that too. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more giga projects announced in the near future, which will be focused on the Sheba, development, mixed-use development in Sheba in the empty quarter, as well as some more projects in and around Riyadh as well. I've got a question about geopolitics and how I see geopolitical situation impacting projects in the kingdom. So look, whether we're talking about Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Palestine, or Israel and Iran and Lebanon, I think we see clearly that the GCC states are quite deliberately on the sidelines of these issues. And I do not see them personally, do not see them being drawn in to any of these sort of issues. They haven't been so far. I don't see rhetoric about them being drawn in. And really, I don't see how it's in their interest to be drawn into these geopolitical conflicts. So I'm quite sanguine and confident about the short and long-term prospects for the projects market in the region. And I don't necessarily, in my opinion, again, could be very wrong, but in my opinion, I don't see them having an impact on projects. In fact, it could even be the opposite. The oil price could rise, which help fund projects. Countries like the UAE, which is known as a safe haven for investment and real estate, for example, could become even more attractive as the result of conflict. Okay, question here. Why are projects that are not official giga projects called giga projects by MEED? Very interesting question. So there are 5 official giga projects in the kingdom: Roshan, Diriyah, Red Sea, Neom, and Qiddiya. And officially, there are no other giga projects. However, everyone has different versions of what they describe as giga projects. There is no standard definition of what a giga project is. It's not really a word that appears in the dictionary, which has a definition. And therefore, people lump giga projects into multiple different elements. Certainly, there's no reason why, for example, New Maraba or King Salman International Airport, which are $50 billion plus projects at least, won't in due course become giga projects themselves. There's no particular process for that. And in fact, giga projects, the official giga projects, aren't treated any differently from any other project under the PIF or any other quasi-government entity. So we simply, for ease of understanding the market, we bunch similar multi-billion-dollar projects, as we saw earlier, as under the definition or under the sort of umbrella of giga projects. But it's a very subjective sort of definition, and certainly something I think Saudi Arabia hasn't done a great job on in terms of defining what giga projects actually are. Can you please share the size of your poll in terms of number of participants? So each of the poll questions had roughly 350 responses. So that's beyond a representative sample. A representative sample would normally be about 250 companies, or a number of about 250. 350 means that statistically it's considered a viable sample and can be considered a market view. What are the leisure projects in Saudi Arabia? Well, leisure and entertainment. Qiddiya, of course, is essentially one of the world's largest entertainment venues. Is under construction. It's going to have a Six Flags theme park. It's got a Formula One racetrack. It's going to have different indoor entertainment and theme park areas. Absolutely massive project. But beyond that, you've got Seven, which is now part of Qiddiya, which is building entertainment centers or complexes around the kingdom across 8 or so different cities. And of course, you've now got cinemas coming up everywhere, and other similar type entertainment facilities as well. On the hotel side, we've got a massive pipeline of hotels being developed, and really entertainment and tourism as a whole are being viewed as a key growth sector in the kingdom in order to serve this untapped demand. So huge potential for entertainment, given that we're coming from a very low base. SEC CapEx program, does it include investments by private companies in their real estate developments? I believe it doesn't. So investments, for example, by Neom in its own substations and overhead lines, or companies like Shamul Holdings in terms of its transmission distribution requirements, are not under the SEC CapEx plans. And while it's true that power generation is going to be PPP, we are not seeing at this stage PPP being used as a route of delivering transmission distribution projects. So No, it is those capex by SEC is purely for its own program. What about the TMG project called Banan Al Riyadh? I have heard of this project, but I am afraid I don't have enough information on it and off the top of my head to be able to answer that question. Do the reports contain the key contact persons of the company and their contact details? Yes, there are some key contact details as well as procurement information in the report. We have reports both on all Saudi Arabia as a whole and all sectors. We also have reports on giga projects in particular. And of course, if you're looking for comprehensive contact details, then MEED projects has more than 50,000 individual contacts, which companies can use to contact clients and contractors. What are PPPs? So PPP stands for public-private partnership. That means that instead of the government providing what would be considered its responsibility, for example, electricity production, water desalination, education, healthcare, it instead tenders the project to the private sector. The private sector will give a price to the government for delivering the service and building the facility, and the government each year will pay the private sector developer a sum for the provision of that service. So rather than the government having to pay the price of a hospital, for example, upfront, instead pays for the private sector to deliver that project over a concession period, which normally is about 20 to 25 years. So the developer has to go and finance the project itself, goes to banks to finance the project. It then itself tenders the construction, is responsible for the construction, and then over the rest of the period of concession is responsible for operating the project and meeting certain KPIs. Once it meets those KPIs, whether that's a certain amount of electricity produced or a certain number of students educated or patients treated, then the government will pay it on a regular basis. So it's a win-win because the private sector gets involved, has an opportunity. The banking community can make profits on the lending, and the government can deliver projects off balance sheet. What is the most important factor to win bidding in Saudi Arabia? Well, it's difficult to answer, but in the region as a whole, low price wins. And indeed, for government procurement, there's even regulations and laws that say the low bidder must win as long as they're technically qualified. That said, it is a seller's market right now. And to deliver these big projects, giga projects in particular, private sector in particular, are looking at innovative ways of delivering projects and sustainable ways. And there is more flexibility to sometimes take a different approach, even if that approach is more expensive. But generally speaking, low price wins. How is the construction sector defined under MEED, in the MEED reports? Construction sector is buildings, so hotels, malls, schools, hospitals, villas, towers, and any other similar project. It's traditionally the largest single sector in the region. What is the current outlook and performance of Saudi Arabia's GDP as compared to last year? So Saudi Arabia's GDP has actually dropped a little in recent months. Primarily, as with other GCC states, GDP is very closely linked to oil prices and oil output. And over the last year or so, oil prices have decreased a little. And Saudi Arabia's oil output has also declined a little as it aims to prop up the oil price. Both of those have a big impact on its GDP because oil and gas sales are its major revenue driver and constitute the largest portion of its economy. So there has been a small decline. But however, if you look at non-oil and gas segment, then that element of the economy has grown quite substantially over the last year. What is the latest economic outlook, please? Is customer confidence growing? Is consumer level spending booming in line with project spend or not? I'm not able to answer that question, but generally speaking, the macroeconomic situation in Saudi Arabia is improving. as we've seen a lot of non-oil and gas economic growth. More and more jobs are being created, and we're seeing greater levels of foreign investment as well. So there is a pretty booming economy right now. Of course, the government is plowing billions of additional dollars into capital expenditure, and this in turn will have an impact on the economy as a whole. So it is a very positive economic outlook right now. Any idea who is taking over Expo 2030 in Riyadh? Okay, so Riyadh, Saudi Arabia won the right to hold the World Expo in 2030 in Riyadh. But to date, it's not clear who is going to be the client on the development of the infrastructure and pavilions serving the expo. In fact, it's not absolutely clear where the expo will even be in Riyadh. Some people say it might be in Qiddiya. Others say no, it's going to be in the original location near the airport. The consensus tends to be moving towards the Royal Commission for Riyadh being the client on it, and the location being near the airport. But the work on the ground is still understood to be fairly far off. In fact, I believe even the master plan and designing is not yet fully complete. So it's a little unknown still at this stage. It's unknown, for example, whether a new organization will be created to develop the expo. Are we going to see any other examples like the line where the project was very much or severely downsized? So if you look at the line, the official message is that it's not being downsized. It's actually that this was always the original intention to develop it in phases. And these first 5 modules, which they are doing, were always going to be the first phase of many. But they has now got a general perception that it's been de-scoped and downsized. I think something like the line is a bit of an exception because you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, and where there is a greater likelihood of being downsized. But if you look at the other giga projects and some of the other projects, then there's not a downsizing per se. But it's more about a kind of rephasing of some of these projects. So what I expect is rather than downsizing these projects, they're going to be extended somewhat, which I guess is good news for the contracting community. Is the downsizing of NEOM primarily, or the line, primarily a planning and forecasting issue, or is it an economic issue? I think primarily it reflects the fact that perhaps hasn't been as much foreign investment to finance these projects, giga projects, as originally planned. They have struggled to attract foreign investment. I think that's one thing. I think the costings for some of these projects may have been done some time ago and didn't necessarily reflect the big increase in inflation, interest rates, and material costs since 2020, 2021, which has impacted that. But again, it maybe goes back to just communication. I mean, the original intention for the line may actually be what we're seeing today. It was just that the original plan was not well communicated, and that people expected the whole of the line to be done by 2030, and that was never a realistic prospect. And indeed, what we're seeing now is just greater visibility or transparency on the fact that under the first stage, this is what's happening. Okay, I could sit here and answer your questions all day. Unfortunately, though, I have gone on for far too long. I'm glad to see that there's still 400 plus people on here. I've got now to 84 questions. I won't be able to answer them all. You do have my details here, email and mobile. So if you do want to send me an email or send me a question on WhatsApp or whatever, then I will do my best to answer and help you out with any questions you might have. So apologies if I didn't get to answer all of your questions, but we've run out of time. I would like to say thank you very much all for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube in due course, and you'll get a link to that sent to you. And we'll also send you the presentation itself in due course as well for you to look at. we will be doing another presentation, a webinar next month on the railway market or railway projects market in the region. And after that, we'll be doing oil and gas in the GCC as a whole as well. Hope to see you for MEED project subscribers with us today. Hope to see you all either in Abu Dhabi on the 17th of September or in Bahrain on the 25th of September. But for now, I hope you found it valuable, and I appreciate you joining me today and listening in. And I hope to speak to you all again very soon. Thank you very much.